We're joined now by State Representative Denise Dittrich, who represents the city of Champlin and western Coon Rapids. Representative Dittrich, thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Now, you serve on both the K-12 education policy and funding committees at the State House, and there's a lot that happened in terms of both funding and policy in the most recent legislative session. But before we get to that, we just heard from Ralph Brower of the Anoka Hennepin Parent Legislative Team and their activities during the recent session. And in the sort of frenzied pace that occurs at the Capitol as a session nears a close, how valuable is it to you to have the Parent Legislative Team as a resource for both getting objective information as well as a parent perspective from within the school district?
Oh, the Parent Legislative Team of Anoka Hennepin is extremely valuable when we're doing our work down at the legislature. And I'm not just saying that because I was a former Parent Legislative Team member either, but what they are is they're kind of like a radar screen for us. They watch the bills that are introduced, and they assess the bills that might have some sort of negative or positive impact on Anoka Hennepin, and they make sure that they then convey the ramifications of the bills on for Anoka Hennepin to us. And you know, I know that Ralph just gave an example, but I just want to reiterate that example because that is the perfect example of what happens at the legislature. There was a bill, and it was called the Computer Adapted Testing Bill, and the Parent Legislative Team learned that that bill in and of itself could cost the Anoka Hennepin School District millions. Well, the Parent Legislative Team gets down to the Capitol immediately. They pull us off the House floor and they talk to us about it, and they've got the spreadsheets and they've got the line graph of how much money this will cost us, and this will put us in statutory operating debt in the year whatever. And so that was the message to us, that we need to get busy and we need to find a solution, and actually we did. We were able to modify the bill then to say that you can use the computer adapted tests, or you can use pencil and paper tests also. And so in that particular instance, their work was extremely valuable. It helped us modify a bill. The author of the bill actually thinks that it killed the bill, but according to us, that was just crucial information for us in our school district. So they are so valued, and the thing that brings such value is they are nonpartisan. It is factual information, and it is all about how it impacts the Anoka Hennepin School District, and it is truly nonpartisan.
Good to hear. Now, we won't focus exclusively on K-12 funding today, but let's start there. Everybody seems focused on the money anyway.
Yeah.
We've been hearing that schools got a freeze in funding, but not any direct cuts. But can the governor still delay funding to school districts or even make cuts as he approaches the unallotment process?
Yes, that's a good question. Right now, I believe that the governor will be delaying payments to the school district. And people at home should understand that's what we call an education shift. And what it means is that the state just delays the payment to the school districts in order for them to cover their operating costs. And when we delay that payment, what that means is then the school district needs to go out and borrow short term. And they do need to eat the interest. That's interest that they have to incur on that short-term borrowing. And in this credit market, I hope that there are no obstacles to them getting this short-term credit and being able to borrow money on the short term. But it does help with their operating expenses. And I do have to say that this shifting of resources does happen normally when we have a large deficit. So this is not unusual to this particular deficit. And actually, I also want to make sure that people understand that we at the House did have an education shift in our original House bill. When you are allowing districts to have flat funding, you do need to look at every revenue source that you possibly can get, and this is depending on the size of the shift, could be $1.5 billion. And so asking the school districts to short-term borrow is a lot better than cutting $1.5 billion from the education budget.
Okay. Now, I often hear frustrated friends and neighbors who say that they vote for their property tax levies for school funding all the time, but they can't understand then why school districts are still facing budget shortfalls. Minnesota 2020, as you've probably seen, recently issued a report showing that although Anoka Hennepin residents have voted for an additional $1,282 in per student spending on schools since 2003, state aid funding per student decreased by over $1,100 when you adjust for inflation. Should property taxpayers expect more requests like this for funding schools from their local property taxes to continue to make up that gap in state funding?
Well, I think it's no secret that we have become very dependent on the local property taxes in order to fund the basics of education. And years ago when we went to school, not we, when I went to school, the property taxes as a resource for funding used to be used for special type things, a football field or something like that. And now most of the school districts are using local property taxes to fund the basics. In fact, that's very evidenced in the fact that 90% of our school districts right now have an